Hello and welcome to day 8 of the Earth Aquinas, where we are reading his Summa in a year. We are continuing today in the first part, question 12, How God is Known by Us. You can follow along with me on newadvent.org. Article 6. Whether of those who see the essence of God, one sees more perfectly than another. Objection 1. It seems that of those who see the essence of God, one does not see more perfectly than another. For it is written, 1 John 3:2, quote, that we shall see him as he is, end quote. But he is only in one way. Therefore, he will be seen by all in one way only, and therefore he will not be seen more perfectly by one and less by another. Reply to objection 1. In these words, quote, we shall see him as he is, end quote, the conjunction as determines the mode of the vision on the part of the object seen, so that the meaning is, we shall see him to be as he is, because we shall see his existence, which is his essence. But it does not determine the mode of vision on the part of the one seeing, as if the meaning of the mode of seeing God will be perfect as if the perfect mode of God's existence. Objection 2. Further, Augustine says, quote, one person cannot see one and the same thing more perfectly than another, end quote. But all who see the essence of God understand the divine essence, for God is seen by the intellect and not by the senses, as was shown above. Therefore, of those who see the divine essence, one does not see it more clearly than another. Thus appears the answer to the second objection. For when it is said that one intellect does not understand the same thing better than the other, but another, this would be true if referred to the mode of the thing understood. For whoever understands it likewise than it really is, does not truly understand, but not if referred to the mode of understanding. For the understanding of one is more perfect than another. For the understanding of one is more perfect than the understanding of another. Objection 3. Further, that anything be seen more perfectly than another can happen in two ways, either on the part of the visible object, or on the part of the visual power of the seer. On the part of the object, it may so happen because the object is received more perfectly in the seer, that is, according to the greater perfection of the similitude. But this does not happen to the present question for God, for God is present to the intellect seeing him, not by way of similitude, but by his essence. It follows then that if one sees him more perfectly than another, this happens according to the difference of the intellectual power. Thus it follows too that the one whose intellectual power is higher, he will see him more clearly. And this is incongruous, since equality with the angels is promised to men as their higher beatitude. Reply to objection 3. The diversity of seeing will not arise on part of the object seen, for the same object will be present to all, i.e., the presence of God, nor will it arise from the diverse participation of the object seen by the different similitudes, but it will arise on part of the diverse faculty of the intellect, not indeed the natural faculty, but the glorified faculty. On the contrary, eternal life consists in the vision of God, according to John 17:3, quote, this is eternal life, that they may know thee, the only true God, end quote, etc. Therefore, if all saw the essence of God equally in the eternal life, all would be equal. The contrary to which is declared by the apostle, quote, stars differ from star in glory, end quote. 1 Corinthians 15:41. I answer that, of those who see the essence of God, one sees him more perfectly than another. This indeed does not take place as if one had a more perfect similitude of God than another, since that vision will not spring up from any similitude, but it will take place because of one intellect will have a greater power or faculty to see God than another. The faculty of seeing God, however, does not belong to the created intellect naturally, but it is given to it by light of glory, which established the intellect in a kind of deiformity, as apparent from what is said above in the preceding article. Hence, the intellect which has more of the light of glory will see God more perfectly, and he will have a fuller participation of the light of glory, who has more charity. Rather, and he who have a fuller participation in the light of glory who has more charity. Because where there is a greater charity, there is a more desire. And desire, in a certain degree, makes the one desiring apt and prepared to receive the object desired. Hence, he who possesses the more charity will see God more perfectly and will be more beatified. Article 7. Whether those who see the essence of God comprehend him. Objection 1. It seems that those who see the divine essence comprehend God. For the apostle says, Philippians 3:12, but after I follow, if I may by any means comprehend, end quote. But the apostle did not follow in vain, for he said in 1 Corinthians 9:26, quote, I so run, not as at uncertainty, end quote. Therefore he comprehended. In the same way, also others whom he invites do to the same, saying, quote, so run that you may comprehend, end quote. Reply to objection 1. Comprehension is twofold. In one sense, it is taken strictly and properly according as something is included then in the one comprehending, and thus in no way is God comprehended, either by the intellect or in any other way, forasmuch as he is infinite and cannot be included in any finite being, so that no finite being can contain him infinitely, in the degree of his own infinity. In this sense, we now take comprehension. But in another sense, comprehension is taken more largely as opposed to, quote, non-attainment, end quote, for he who attains to anyone is said to comprehend him when he attains to him. And in this sense, God is comprehended by the blessed, according to the words, quote, I held him, and I will not let him go, end quote, Canticles 3:4. In this sense also are to be understood the words quoted from the apostle concerning the comprehension. And in this way, comprehension is one of the three prerogatives of the soul, responding to hope as a vision to faith, and fruition responds to charity. For even among ourselves, not everything is seen or held or possessed. Not everything seen is held or possessed, for as much as things either appear sometimes far off, or they're not in our power to be attained. Neither again do we always enjoy what we possess, either because we find no pleasure in them, or because such things are not the ultimate end of our desire, so as to satisfy and quell it. But the blessed possess three things in God, because they see him, and in seeing him, they possess him as present. But the blessed possess three things in God, because they see him, and in seeing him, they possess him as the present, having the power to see him always, and possessing him, they enjoy him as the ultimate fulfillment of desire. Objection 2. Further, Augustine says, quote, that is comprehended which is so seen as whole, that nothing is hidden from the seer, end quote. But if God is seen in his essence, he is seen whole, and nothing is hidden from the seer, since God is simple. Therefore, whoever sees his essence comprehends him. Reply to objection 2. God is called incomprehensible, not because anything of him is not seen, but because he is not seen as perfectly as he is capable of being seen. Thus, when any demonstratable proposition is known by probable reason only, it does not follow that any part of it is unknown, either by the subject or the predicate or the composition, but that it is not perfectly known, as it is capable of being known. Hence, Augustine, in his definition of comprehension, says that the whole is comprehended when it is seen in such a way that nothing of it is hidden from the seer, or when its boundaries can be completely viewed or traced. For the boundaries of a thing are said to be completely surveyed when the end of knowledge of it is attained. Objection 3. Further, if we say that he is seen whole, but not wholly, it may be contrarily urged that wholly refers to the mode of the seer, or to the mode of the thing seen. But he who has seen the essence of God sees him wholly. If the mode of the thing is considered, forasmuch as he sees himself as he is. Also, likewise, he sees him wholly, if the mode of the seer is meant, forasmuch as the intellect will with its full power seize the divine essence. Therefore, all who see the essence of God see him wholly. Therefore, they comprehend him. Objection 3. Reply to Objection 3, rather. The word wholly denotes a mode of the object, not that the whole object does not come under the knowledge, but that the mode of the object is not the mode of the one who knows. Therefore, he who sees the essence of God sees in him that he exists infinitely, and that he is infinitely knowable. Nevertheless, this infinite mode does not extend to the enable the knower to know infinitely. Thus, for instance, a person can have a probable opinion that the proposition is demonstrable, although he himself does not know it as demonstrated. On the contrary, it is written, quote, O most mighty, great and powerful, the Lord of hosts is thy name, great in counsel and incomprehensible in thought. End quote. Jeremiah chapter 32, verses 18 through 19. Therefore he cannot be comprehended. I answer that it is impossible for any created intellect to comprehend God, yet, quote, for the mind to attain to God in some degree is a great beatitude, end quote, as Augustine says. In proof of this, we must consider what is comprehended is perfectly known, and that is perfectly known which is known so far as it can be known. Thus, if anything is capable of scientific demonstration is held only by an opinion resting on a probable proof, it is not comprehended. As, for instance, if anyone knows by scientific demonstration that a triangle has three angles, has three angles to right angles, he comprehended the truth. Whereas if anyone accepts the probable opinion because wise men or most men teach it, he cannot be said to comprehend the thing itself, because it does not attain to the perfect mode of knowledge of which it is intrinsically capable. But no created intellect can attain to the perfect mode of the knowledge of the divine intellect, whereof it is intrinsically capable. Which thus appears, everything is knowable according to its actuality. But God, whose being is infinite, as was shown above, is infinitely knowable. Now, to know created intellect can know God infinitely. For the created intellect knows the divine essence more or less perfectly, in proportion as it receives a greater or lesser light of glory. Since therefore the created light of glory received into any created intellect cannot be infinite, it is clearly impossible for any created intellect to know God in an infinite degree. Hence, it is impossible that it should comprehend God. Article 8. Whether those who see the essence of God see all in God. Objection 1. It seems that those who see the essence of God in all things. Let me try that again. It seems that those who see the essence of God see all things in God. For Gregory says, quote, What they do not see, who see him who sees all things. End quote. But God sees all things. Therefore, those who see God see all things. Reply to Objection 1. Gregory speaks as regards the object being sufficient, namely God, who in himself sufficiently contains and shows forth all things. But it does not follow that whoever sees God knows all things, for he does not perfectly comprehend him. Objection 2. Further, whoever sees a mirror sees what is reflected in the mirror, but all actual or possible things shine forth in God as in a mirror, for he knows all things in himself. Therefore, whoever sees God sees all actual things in him, and also all possible things. Reply to Objection 2. It is not necessary that whoever sees a mirror should see all things that is in the mirror, unless his glance comprehends the mirror itself. Objection 3. Further, whoever understands the greater can understand the least, as is said in De Anima. But all that God does, or can do, are less than his essence. Therefore, whoever understands God can understand all that God does or can do. Reply to Objection 3. Although it is more to see God than to see all things else, still it is a greater thing to see him so that all things are known in him, than to see him in such a way that not all things, but the fewer, or the more known are in him. For it has been shown in this article that the more things are known in God, that more things are known in God according as he is seen more perfectly or less. Objection 4. Further, the rational creature naturally desires to know all things. Therefore, if in seeing God it does not know all things, its natural desire will not rest satisfied. Thus, in seeing God it will not be fully happy, which is incongruous. Therefore, he who sees God knows all things. Reply to Objection 4. The natural desire of the rational creature is to know everything that belongs to the perfection of the intellect, namely, the species and genre of all things and their type. And these everyone who sees in the divine essence will see in God. But to know other singulars, their thoughts and their deeds, does not belong to the perfection of the created intellect, nor does its natural desire go out to these things. Neither again does its desire to know things that exist not as yet, but which God calls into being, can call into being. Yet if God alone were seen, who is the font and principle of all being and of all truth, he would so fill the natural desires of all knowledge that nothing else would be desired, and that the seer be completely beatified. Hence, Augustine says, quote, "Unhappy the man who knoweth all these," i.e., all creatures, "and knoweth not thee. But happy whoso knoweth thee, although he knoweth not these. And whoso knoweth both thee and them is not the happier for them, but for thee alone." End quote. On the contrary, the angels see the essence of God and yet do not know all things. For as Dionysius says, quote, "The inferior angels are cleansed from their ignorance by the superior." End quote. Also, they are the ignorant of the future congenient things, of the secret thoughts, For this knowledge belongs to God alone. Therefore, whoever sees the essence of God does not know all things. I answer that. The created intellect, in seeing the divine essence, does not see it in all that God does or can do, for it is manifest that things are seen in God as they are in him, but other things are seen in God as effects are in the power of their cause. Therefore, all things are seen in God as the effect is seen in its cause. Now, it is clear that the more perfectly a cause is seen, the more of its effects can be seen. For whoever has a lofty understanding, as soon as one demonstrative principle is put before him, can gather the knowledge of many conclusions. But this is beyond the weaker intellect, for he needs things to be explained to him separately. And so a intellect can know all things, can know all the effects of a cause, and the reasons for those effects in the cause itself, if it comprehends the cause wholly. Now, no created intellect can comprehend God wholly, as was shown above. Therefore, no created intellect in seeing God can know all that God does or can do, for this would be to comprehend his power. But of what God does or can do, any intellect can know the more perfectly it can see God. Article 9. Whether what is seen by those who see the divine essence is seen through any similitude. Objection 1. It seems that what is seen by God what is seen in God by those who see the divine essence is seen by means of some similitude, for every kind of knowledge comes about by the knower being assimilated to the object known. Thus, for the intellect, an act becomes the act for thus the intellect an act becomes an actual intelligible, and the sense an act becomes the actual sensible, inasmuch as it is formed by similitude of the object, as the eye by similitude of color. Therefore, if the intellect of the one who sees the divine essence understands any creatures in God, it must be informed by their similitudes. Objection 1. The created intellect of one who sees God is assimilated to what is seen in God, inasmuch as it is united to the divine essence, which is the similitude of all things pre-exist. Objection 2. Further, what we have seen, we keep in memory, but Paul, seeing the essence of God whilst in ecstasy, when he had ceased to see the divine essence, as Augustine says, remembered many of the things which he had seen in the rapture. Hence he said, quote, I have heard secret words which is not granted to man to utter, end quote. 2 Corinthians 12:4. Therefore, it must be said that certain similitudes of what he remembered remained in his mind. In the same way, when he actually saw the essence of God, he had certain similitudes or ideas of what he actually saw in it. Objection 2. Reply to objection 2, rather. Some of the cognitive faculty form other images from those first conceived. Thus, the imagination from the preconceived images of the mountain or of gold can form the likeness of a golden mountain, and the intellect, from the preconceived ideas of genus and difference, forms the idea of species. In a like manner, from the similitude of an image, we can form in our minds the similitudes of the original images. Thus, Paul or any other person who sees God, by this very vision of the divine essence, can form in himself the similitudes of what is seen in the divine essence, which remained in Paul even when he had ceased to see the essence of God. Still, this kind of vision whereby things are seen by the likeness thus conceived is not the same as whereby things are seen in God. On the contrary, a mirror and what is seen in it by means a mirror and what is seen in it are seen by means of one likeness. But all things are seen in God as in an intelligible mirror. Therefore, if God himself is not seen by any similitude but his own essence, neither are things seen in him by any similitude or idea. I answer that. I answer that. Those who see the divine essence see what they see in God, not produced by any likeness, but by the divine essence itself united to their intellect. For each thing is known insofar as its likeness is in the one who knows. Now, this takes place in two ways. For as things which are like one and the same thing are like to each other, the cognitive faculty can be assimilated to the knowable object in two ways. In one way, it is assimilated by the object itself, when it is directly informed by similitude, and the object is known in itself. Another, when informed by a similitude which resembles the object. In this way, knowledge is not of the thing itself, but of the thing in its likeness. For the knowledge of a man in himself differs from the knowledge of him in his image. Hence, to know things thus by their likeness, in the one who knows, is to know them in themselves or in their own nature, whereas to know them by similitude pre-existing in God is to see them in God. Now, there is a difference between these two kinds of knowledge. Hence, according to the knowledge whereby things are known by those who see the essence of God, they are seen in God himself, not by any other similitude, but by the divine essence, alone present to their intellect, which also God himself is seen. Article 10. Whether those who see the essence of God see all they see in it at the same time. Objection 1. It seems that those who see the essence of God do not see all they see in him at one and the same time. For according to the philosopher, quote, it may happen that many things are known, but only one is understood, end quote. But what is seen in God is understood, for God is seen by the intellect. Therefore, those who see God do not see him in him at the same time. Reply to objection 1. We understand one thing when we understand by why we understand only one I'm sorry. We understand one thing only when we understand by why we understand one thing only when we understand by one idea. But many things understood by one idea are understood simultaneously. As in the idea of man, we understand animal and rational, and in the idea of a house, we understand the wall and the roof. Objection 2. Further, Augustine says, quote, God moves a spiritual creature according to time, i.e., end quote, i.e., by intelligence and affection. But the spiritual creature is the angel who sees God. Therefore, those who see God understand and are affected successively, for time means succession. Reply to Article 2. As regards their natural knowledge, whereby they know things by diverse ideas given to them, the angels do not know all things simultaneously, and thus they are moved in the act of understanding according to time. But as regards what they see in God, they see at all time. they see all at the same time. On the contrary, Augustine says, quote, "Our thoughts will not be unstable, going to and fro from one thing to another, but we shall see and know at one glance." End quote. I answer that what is seen in the world is not seen successively, but at the same time. And proof wherefore, we ourselves cannot know many things all at once, forasmuch as we understand many things by means of ideas. But our intellect cannot be actually informed by many diverse ideas at the same time, so as to understand by them. As one body cannot bear different shapes simultaneously. Hence, when many things can be understood by one idea, they are understood at the same time, whereas the parts of the whole are understood successively, and not at all at the same time. If each is understood by its own ideas, whereas if all are understood under the one idea of whole, they are understood simultaneously. Now, it was shown above that things seen in God are not seen singularly, but by their own similitude. But all things are seen by the one essence of God. Hence they are seen simultaneously and not successively. Article 11. Whether anyone in this life can see the essence of God. Objection 1. It seems that one can in this life see the divine essence. For Jacob said, quote, I have seen God face to face, end quote. Genesis 32:30. But to see him face to face is to see his essence, as appears from the words, quote, we see now in a glass and in a dark manner, but then face to face, end quote. 1 Corinthians 13:12. Reply to objection 1. According to Dionysius, a man is said in Scripture to see God in the sense that certain figures are formed in the senses or imagination, according to some similitude representing, in part, the divinity. So when Jacob says, quote, I have seen God face to face, end quote, this does not mean the divine essence, but some figure representing God. And this is to be referred to some high mode of prophecy, so that God seems to speak, though an imaginary vision, as will later be explained, in treating of the degrees of prophecy. We may also say that Jacob spoke thus to designate some exalted intellectual completation above the ordinary state. Objection 2. Further, the Lord said to Moses, quote, I speak to him mouth to mouth, and plainly, not by riddles and figures doth thou see the Lord. End quote. Numbers 12:8. But this is to see God in his essence. Therefore, it is possible to see the essence of God in this lifetime. Reply to objection 2. As God works miracles in corporeal things, so he also does supernatural wonders above the common order, raising the minds of some living in the flesh beyond this use of sense, even up to the vision of his own essence. As Augustine says of Moses, the teacher of the Jews, and of Paul, the teacher of the Gentiles. This will be more treated in the question of the rapture. Objection 3. Further, that wherein we know all other things, whereby we judge other things, is known in itself to us. But even now, we know all things in God. For Augustine says, quote, if we both see that what you say is true, and we both see what I say is true, where, I ask, do we see this? Neither I and thee, nor thou and me, but both of us in this very incommunicable truth itself above our minds, end quote. He also says, quote, we judge of all things according to the divine truth, end quote. That, quote, it is the duty of reason to judge these corporeal things according to the incorporeal and eternal ideas, which, unless they were above the mind, could not be communicated, end quote. Therefore, even in this life, we see God himself. Reply to objection 3. All things were said to be seen in God, and all things are judged in him, because by the participation of his light we know and judge all things. For the light of natural reason is itself a participation of the divine light, as likewise we are said to see and judge of sensible things in the sun, i.e., by the sun's sunlight. Hence, Augustine says, quote, the lessons of instruction can only be seen as if it were by their own sun, end quote, namely God. As therefore, in order to see a sensible object, it is necessary to see the substance of the sun. So in a like manner, to see an intelligible object, it is not necessary. Let me start again. As therefore, in order to see a sensible object, it is not necessary to see the substance of the sun. So in any like manner, to see the intelligible object, it is not necessary to see the essence of God. Objection 4. Further, according to Augustine, those things that are in the soul by their essence are seen by the intellectual vision, but the intellectual vision of intelligible things, not by similitudes, but by their very essence. He also says, therefore, since God is in our soul by his essence, it follows that he is seen by us in his essence. Reply to objection 4. Intellectual vision is of the things which are in the soul by their essence, as sensible things are in the intellect, as intelligible things are in their intellect, rather. And thus, God is in the soul of the blessed. Not thus he is in our soul, but by not and thus God is in the soul of the blessed, not that he is not thus he is in our soul, but by presence, essence, and power. On the contrary, it is written, quote, man shall not see me and live, end quote, Exodus 32:20. And a gloss upon this says, quote, in this mortal life, God can be seen by certain images, and not by the likeness itself of his own nature, end quote. I answer that. God cannot be seen in his essence by a mere human being, except be he separated from this mortal life. The reason is because, as was shown above, the mode of knowledge follows the mode of the nature of the knower. But our souls, as long as we live in this life, have its being in incorporeal matter. Hence, it knows only what it has a form of matter, or what can be known by such a form. Now, it is evident that the divine essence cannot be known through this nature of material things. For it is shown above that the knowledge of God by means of any created similitude is not the vision of his essence. Hence, it is impossible for the soul of man in this life to see the essence of God. This can be seen in the fact that the more our soul is abstracted from corporeal things, the more it is capable of receiving abstracted intellectual things. Hence, in dreams and in alienations of the bodily senses, divine revelation and foresight of the future events are perceived the more clearly. It is not possible, therefore, that the soul in this mortal life should be raised up to the supreme object, to the supreme intelligible objects, i.e., to the divine essence. Article 12. Whether God can be known in this life by natural reason. Objection 1. It seems that by natural reason we cannot know God in this life. For Boethius says that, quote, the reason does not grasp simple form, end quote. But God is a supremely simple form, as was shown above. Therefore, natural reason cannot attain to know him. Reply to objection 1. Reason cannot reach up to a simple form as to know, quote, what it is, end quote. But it can know, quote, whether it is, end quote. Objection 2. Further, the soul understands nothing by natural reason without the use of imagination, but we cannot have imagination of God, who is incorporeal. Therefore, we cannot know God by natural knowledge. Reply to objection 2. God is known by natural knowledge through the image of his effects. Objection 3. Further, the knowledge of natural reason belongs to both good and evil, inasmuch as they have a common nature. But the knowledge of God belongs to only the good. For Augustine says, quote, the weak eye of the human mind is not fixed on the excellent light unless purified by the justice of faith. End quote. Therefore, God cannot be known by natural reason. Reply to objection 3. As the knowledge of God's essence is by grace, it belongs only to the good. But the knowledge of him by natural reason can belong both to the good and the bad. Hence, as Augustine says, retracting what he has said before, quote, I do not approve of what I have said in prayer. Quote, God who willest that only the pure should know truth, in first quote. For it can be answered that many who are not pure can know many truths, in second quote, i.e. by natural reason. On the contrary, it is written in Romans 1:19, quote, that which is known of God, end quote, namely, what can be known of God by natural reason, quote, is manifest in them, end quote. I answer that our natural knowledge, begins from sense. Hence, our natural knowledge can go so far as it can be led by sensible things. But our mind cannot be led by sense so far as to see the essence of God, because the sensible effects of God do not equal the power of God as their cause. Hence, from the knowledge of the sensible things, the whole power of God cannot be known, nor therefore his essence can be seen. But because they are his effects, and dependent on their cause, we can lead from them so far as to know God, quote, to know of God, quote, whether he exists, end quote, and not to know him, and not to know of him what necessarily must belong to him, as the first cause of all things, exceeding all things caused by him. Hence, we know that his relationship with creatures, so far as to be the cause of them all, also that creatures differ from him, inasmuch as he is not in any way part of what is inasmuch as he is not in any way part of what is caused by him, and the creatures are not removed from him by reason or of any defect on his part, but because he superexceeds them all. Article 13. Whether by grace a higher knowledge of God can be attained by natural reason. It seems that by grace a higher knowledge of God is not obtained by natural reason. For Dionysius says that whoever is the more united to God in this life is united to him as to one entirely unknown. He says the same of Moses, who nevertheless obtained a certain excellence by knowledge conferred by grace, but to be united to God while ignoring of him, quote, what he is, end quote, also comes about by natural reason. Therefore, God is not known to us by grace, not more known to us by grace than natural reason. Reply to objection 1. Although by revelation of grace in this life we cannot know of God, quote, what he is, end quote, and thus are united to him as to one unknown, still we know him more fully according as many and more excellent of his effects are demonstrated to us, and according as we attribute to him some things known by the divine revelation, to which natural reason cannot reach, as for instance that God is three and one. Objection 2. Further, we can acquire the knowledge of the divine things by natural reason only through the imagination, as the same applies to the knowledge given by grace. For Dionysius says that, quote, it is impossible for the divine ray to shine upon us except as screened round about by the many colors scattered veils, end quote. Therefore we cannot know God more fully by grace than by natural reason. Reply to objection 2. From the images either received from the senses in the natural order or divinely formed in the imagination, we have so much more excellent intelligible knowledge, the stronger the intelligible light is in man, and thus the revelation given by images of a fuller knowledge is received by the infusion of the divine light. Objection 3. Further, our intellect adheres to God by grace of faith, but faith does not seem to be knowledgeable. For Gregory says that, quote, things not seen are the objects of faith, and not of knowledge, end quote. Therefore, there is not given to us a more excellent knowledge of God by grace. Reply to objection 3. Faith is a kind of knowledge, inasmuch as the intellect is determined by the faith to some knowledgeable object. But this determination to one object does not proceed from the vision of the believer, but from the vision of him who is believed. Thus, as far as the faith falls short of the vision, it falls short of knowledge, which belongs to science. For science determines the intellect to one object by the vision and understanding of the first principles. On the contrary, the Apostle says that God hath revealed the Spirit to us, that, quote, what none of the princes of this world knew, end quote. 1 Corinthians 2:10, namely the philosophers, as the gloss expounds. I answer that we have a more perfect knowledge of God by grace than by natural reason, which is proved thus. The knowledge which we have by natural reason contains two things: images derived from the sensible objects, and the natural intelligible light, enabling us to abstract from them intelligible concepts. Now, in both of these, human knowledge is assisted by the revelation of grace. For the intellectual natural light is strengthened by the infusion of the gratuitous light, and sometimes also the images of human imagination are divinely formed, so as to express divine things better than those do which are received from the sensible objects, as appears in prophetic visions, while sometimes sensible things, or even voices, are divinely formed to express some divine meaning, As in the baptism, the Holy Ghost was seen in the shape of a dove, and the voice of the Father was heard. Quote, "This is my beloved Son." End quote. Matthew 3:17. All right. Well, thank you for joining me today, where we finished off question 12. Now, tomorrow we will continue, starting a new question, question 13, the names of God, Article 1, whether a name can be given to God. And if you've made it this far, I hope you enjoyed it and found it spiritually enlightening. And if you did so, I would hope that you would share this with a friend. God bless you and have a good day.